Hello, my name is Russell Myers, independent for U.S. President for 2024. Too many people do not understand what the goal is of the U.S. government at this time. Once you see it, you will not ever stop seeing it, I promise you. The goal is not something which began with this administration or the previous or any administration in your lifetime. It is not the domain of one major party or the other, but both in tandem. It began at the founding of this country and has continued unabated since that time. It has been hidden and obscured under many names, but has remained constant throughout. This is not your interest or my agenda. It serves no valid or beneficial purpose to you or I. Indeed, very much the opposite in every way. The goal, very simply put, is global dominance, making all other nations and our own populace subservient to the U.S. government, absolute control over every aspect of every life on the planet. I realize that you may have heard some variation on this statement at some point. Some will consider my own statement to be paranoid, but I hope that you will give me only a few moments to illustrate the point more clearly. The first thing to consider on this issue is that the first defense of such an agenda would be an attempt to invalidate this claim, call it mental illness, etc. If you have paid attention to any of my previous writings or videos, I doubt you would ever consider me anything less than completely sane. In brief, we can consider the enslavement of the African people. Africa was actually well developed and in some ways agriculturally and technologically superior to the West at that time. The colonization of Africa, the slaughter of hundreds of millions of Native Americans, and what can only be called the colonization of the area we now call the U.S. All the wars, civil wars, and deceptions involved in the expansion of the U.S. government. The military invasions and continued military occupation of Hawaii. The brutality of the building of the Panama Canal. The overthrow of too many governments to count. Invasions and occupations, including Eastern Russia at one point. The numerous bloodbaths in the Middle East. The installation of fascist dictators and extremist regimes. Dictation to other countries of their own trade arrangements. This piece would be far too long to go into detail on all of this. This list just sets the tone from here. Many people make the major mistake of believing that our current foreign policy is meant to control and isolate Russia and China. That is a false assumption in the short term. The point is debt. The modern version of colonization and imposing subservience is debt. The U.S., via the IMF and the World Bank, has enslaved numerous countries with crushing debt, ensuring these countries will remain under U.S. control for indefinite periods of time. In the past, this had been the plan for Russia and China. Instead, they managed to develop resources, evict the IMF, the World Bank, and the Rothschilds banks. Once they did this, they became economic powerhouses which are unlikely to be stopped. Instead, they have now allied, making them individually and collectively stronger than they have ever been. As of now, Ukraine has been saddled with so much debt that economic experts say they will never be able to pay it off. Yet Ukraine is only a small part of the puzzle. The U.S. has led Europe and the UK to impose self-destructive sanctions on Russia while trying to get them to all but eliminate trade with China. The results have been what we see now: hyperinflation, rising social disturbances, and severe dependence on the U.S. Even the claim that sanctions have failed is incorrect. The boomerang effect of the sanctions were well warned about in advance by many economists, by Putin, and by myself. You do not cut off the world's third largest oil and gas exporter, the world's leading grain exporter, and producer of 1/3 of the global fertilizer supply without dire repercussions being foreseen. For many years after World War II, Europe and the UK were highly dependent on and economically indebted to the US. Their industries, resources, and even manpower were demolished during the war. The U.S. had waited for much of that to happen before stepping in. If we had stepped in sooner, less damage may have been done. During the war, the U.S. offered the Lend-Lease program, which has since been revived, which left the U.K. paying debts to the U.S. for decades, only paying the last of that debt in 2006. It took years, but Europe was managing to climb out of the damage of the global financial collapse of 2008 and 2009. Their industries over the decades have been restored. They created trade agreements aside from the U.S. This could not be tolerated. The solution was obvious: create conditions under which Europe would again be subservient to and dependent on the U.S. These conditions did not come about in the past few months. This is a culmination of decades of planning, implementation, and corruption. For over a century, the U.S. has been vehemently opposed to socialism, which I have explained before has many different forms. The reason that the U.S. government is so strongly opposed to socialism is that it is the purest form of actual democracy. It is a decentralized form of government. The more centralized, more greed-driven, and elitist a government structure is, the more corrupt it becomes, and hence easier to control. Control the head, you control the dragon. This cannot happen in a governmental system which has extreme accountability and the people have a strong voice. For many years after World War II, most of Europe had a very robust public sector or sectors. Under U.S. tutelage, based on the Friedman Chicago School of Economics model, over the past 20-plus years, that public sector has been increasingly privatized. This has led to higher energy and fuel costs, the defunding of programs like public health services, banking, and public transportation in varying degrees across Europe. Services which were once guaranteed can now be largely denied or severely reduced. Today, the entire European population is fully contained, controlled, and enslaved by fear and debt. To an unseeing eye, it seems like this happened almost overnight, when it has taken at least a generation. Debt is portrayed as assistance. Militarism is displayed as morality. Malevolent dominance is claimed as caring. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. George Orwell, 1984. This control does not stop with other countries. I have stated in the past that U.S. foreign policy has now become U.S. domestic policy. Today, tens of millions of Americans are at immediate risk of eviction. Many millions more than that are relying on credit cards and loans to buy food, pay rent, use short-term loans to make payments on long-term loans, waiting in line for ever-reducing supplies at the food bank, just hoping they can somehow break the cycle or wait out what they were promised were short-term conditions, or until they find a better paying job or a second or a third job. Pray they're not next in line to get a pink slip like 20 or 200 other people last week. Reducing their insulin dosage or skipping doses altogether. Cancel the doctor's appointment. Maybe this cough will go away. Maybe that lump is just a new mole. Send the kids to bed hungry. Send the kids to school hungry. Cancel Netflix. Turn off the AC and use a fan. Turn off the heat and put on a sweater. Turn off all the lights. Dollar Tree has candles. Sell grandma's jewelry and the wedding ring. Hock the power tools. Rage against taxes and apply for public assistance. It'll all get better after the midterms if the right team wins, right? Won't it? For now, just keep raging online about the other team. Blame Biden, blame Trump, blame Putin, blame Xi, because that makes a difference. All of this is a collection of means of control, dominance, enslavement, and social engineering. I have made it very clear in policy proposal after policy proposal that things do not have to be this way. There are other ways of doing things which would alleviate most, if not all, of these ills. The frank truth is that if we do not adopt some or all of these proposals, things are going to continue getting worse. The current government and media will never tell you any of this because, as I have explained, where we are has been planned for as long as many young people have been alive. Maybe much longer than that. There is no chance that these plans will be abandoned while the same people remain in charge, or if we elect others who gorge themselves on power and greed at the expense of all else. This is why I need your help to expand awareness about this campaign. We need to talk about the quiet parts very loudly. I do not engage in putting forth wild ideas without showing clearly that we have realistic, better options, which I explain in extreme detail. I do not do talking points or empty campaign slogans. However, I lack the resources of a typical campaign. Share this message. Talk about these things and this campaign. Stand with me. If you can afford it, please donate whatever you can to help expand this campaign. I cannot do it without as many of you as possible. Please read my policy proposals. You will find that they make absolute sense in ways that you have probably never heard in your life and never will again. We have to do this. I care about the American people. I care about people all over the world. We can fix this, but we've got to try together. Again, share this message in whatever form you find it. And let's try. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe, follow my campaign, support my campaign however you can, even if it's not with money. Just share the knowledge about this campaign. Share my policies. Read through them. Watch them on video. Whatever. Thank you very much.